North Korea will skip the Tokyo Olympics this summer to shield its athletes from the virus. Also, because they've already awarded Kim Jong-un the gold medal in every event.
Caitlyn Jenner is considering a run for governor of California. Come on, Californians are too smart to vote for an unqualified reality star when they could vote for an unqualified TikTok celebrity.
Whale watchers in Southern California spotted a rare stampede of 1,000 dolphins swimming together. They're supposedly from the Central Coast, but since they weren't wearing masks, they're probably from Florida.
A recent survey finds that more Brits want Prince William to succeed the Queen rather than Prince Charles, though William only beat Charles by a hair.
And finally, the number of billionaires worldwide shot up 30% during the pandemic. It's not easy being a billionaire in a pandemic. You have the darndest time hiring a masseuse for your submarine. Tell me about it. Anyway, welcome to Biden Time. Very excited to be here as always. I'm Christian Bladt with the mirth maker herself, Tamra Brown. And let's see, down there we have Scott Moore. Hey, everybody.
Hey, good to be here.
I wanted to start off talking about baseball, which I could do for the whole show, but it is a little bit more indirect. I did want to talk about it relates to the Georgia voting law. So Major League Baseball decided after there was some rumbling from people in Major League Baseball, including the manager of Los Angeles Dodgers, who won the World Series last year, he would be the manager for the National League in the All-Star game. And he very early on was saying, like, I don't know if I want to do that. So I think Major League Baseball saw that there's a lot of problems, a lot of bad reactions to this law, that was passed, this voting law in Georgia. So they decided that they would take away the Major League Baseball All-Star game from Atlanta. This was on like the second day of the season. They decided this, and they are moving it to Denver, and there's probably a few reasons for that, which we can talk about a little bit. But there's a backlash of people that are saying, like, "Oh my God, I'm gonna, I'm going to."
I'm going to continue to not watch baseball.
Yeah. Well, the interesting tweets that I see are people are like, I'm going to not support the MLB. And you realize if they call it the MLB, they probably don't really talk about baseball very much. Right. And then, there's also been some criticisms of a large Georgia corporation, Coca-Cola, for some of their more, I'm using air quotes, woke response to this. And a boycott for Coca-Cola was called for, including by former President Donald Trump, who, the internet being the internet, wanted to make sure that we all knew, despite him calling for a ban of Coke products, there was a Diet Coke on his desk, as there always was. He had a little meeting with his pal, Stephen Miller. And so the day after he said no more Coke, he just, he's like Tony Montana. You can't say no to Coke is what it really comes down to. So I wanted to talk about this in the macro in terms of the business, but I wanted to start with it from the baseball standpoint. I wanted to talk to Tamra first about that. So when you heard that there might be a problem with the All-Star game being there, it reminded me, I think it was in 2011, there were a lot of people that wanted to move that All-Star game out of Phoenix because Arizona had an immigration policy that I think a lot of people were upset by. And ultimately that didn't happen. So I heard this about the game being in Atlanta, and I'm like, well, this is going to probably be like that. There's going to be people upset. They'll figure out some way to try and make amends, and then they'll go from there. So Tamara, when you heard that there was first a rumbling and then the idea that this All-Star game was actually being moved entirely out of Georgia, what did you think?
Well, I think it's fantastic that they made that decision, but I am completely shocked that they did because of the fact that anybody who is a baseball fan after the 90s strike knows that Major League Baseball does not care an ounce about retaining fans. They do not try to get more people to come back to the sport of baseball. They are making money they make money on ticket sales, and they make money on their broadcast revenue. So they do not, the many flaws in Major League Baseball that need to be fixed in order to bring back an American fan base, MLB does not care one squat to make those changes. So the fact that they actually are doing something to, you know, the right claims that they're caving to woke culture, and it's like MLB doesn't cave to anything. They only look at their bottom line. So if anything, I think that this means that you know, the lack of the season and ticket sales over the pandemic has forced them to consider, you know, some sort of like, okay, maybe we need people to spend money on baseball again, and this is the tactic that they chose. So, if that's the case, you know, I'm glad that it was an important move to be. It was an important stance to make, and so you know, I'm not giving them any ethical credit, but if the fact that they need people to spend money on tickets again forces them to do the right thing, then great.
Yeah, I think the thing I'll give them credit on is how quickly they did it. You know, because I felt like this was going to drag on for a while, and again, I didn't expect them to actually do it. I mean, look, the Atlanta Braves is a team, as much as I hate them as a Mets fan. I mean, their fan base covers like 11 states, and you know, for years their games were always on the TBS Superstation. So whether you like the Braves or not, whether they were good or not, they were on your TV. You know, and you know, it's especially in, you know, before states like Florida had teams. You know, now they have two. So yeah, I think that it was impressive. And look, ultimately, the people that are criticizing it are often the same people who talk about the importance of free market and letting business dictate their own policies. And so this is a corporation that decided that this is what's important to us. So we're not, you know, it's not a right that a team gets to have an all-star game. So we're going to give it to another state. And we'll kind of talk about them moving it to Denver in a minute, but I wanted to let Scott jump in and share some of his thoughts about, you know, just sort of hearing about this as a step that Major League Baseball is taking, the MLB is taking.
Well, little fun fact: my grandfather was briefly, before World War II, in the pros for the Cardinals, and my dad was actually named after Don Larson. So there's always like a little bit of connection.
Cool. Look at that! I love that.
Yeah, because he actually. My grandfather had known him, and so it was kind of cool. So there's always that little bit of like, oh, baseball, even though
what was his position?
I don't even remember because he never talked about it. So, and he died like when I was 5. So,
boy,
I think
it was like the Korean War for him. I don't want to go back to those days.
We don't talk about the Cardinals organization in this household.
No, I actually think if he had lived longer, I probably would have been more involved with baseball. I'll just say that, because my dad really wasn't, and like you were saying, like we were Cubs fans when, and in fact, another fun baseball story is my mom went into labor when she had walked up at a Cubs game and had gone up all the stairs to the nosebleed section, so she went into labor with me there. But so we were kind of Cubs fans, but you know, when we moved to Florida, there was not a team, and my dad wasn't really big, huge baseball player. So I think, again, if my grandfather had lived, I probably would be playing baseball now. Who knows? But that being said, I think I was more impressed by the MLB's move because it is, kind of to Tamra's point, it is more of a white sports-based fans generally. You know, it's not as diverse as, let's say, the NBA or you know, any most other sports. It's a little bit more of a white skewing sport, in a little bit more of a, you could say, the traditional pastime of America, you know, a little bit more conservative. So I think it was a bigger deal in a way to see the MLB make the stance, as you were saying, the MLB make that stance and make that change and be so quick about it because of the fact of their background and everything. But also, to Tamra's point, look, they're looking at their bottom line, and businesses are not going to make edgy decisions if it's really going to affect their bottom line. And after the pandemic, I think the companies are going to be even more careful about what they do and what they don't do. And I think most companies today see the winning strategy is to take the fact that, you know, the country is diversifying, things are changing, you want to be open to you know, these type of things, and most companies are going to come around to that. They're going to go on that side because they know it's going to help them rather than hurt them. The only thing that I go back and forth on is, it does hurt a state, and you do see states do. I mean, we saw that with North Carolina with the bathroom bill from a few years ago. You saw that in Indiana with the gay adoptions and other things, and the religious right to discriminate back a few years ago when Mike Pence was governor. You see these things and they do backfire. But I do have a concern when it was going to be in Atlanta, and I've said this before with the pandemic, it's not just those very rich people that are not going to be affected. It is those everyday workers and everybody that are working in the concession stands and the ones that are working at the stadium there. It just kind of trickles down. And now those people that are really going to be affected by not having this extra money that they may have been planning on, especially after the pandemic, it kind of does hurt them. So to me, it's like I go back and forth. I think it's important to kind of slap the wrists of states that do things like this. But on the other hand, when it starts to affect the everyday people that you're also trying to support in this case, you're sort of backfiring in a way. And I know Stacey Abrams is kind of on that same page. And I've wrestled with that as well. I was like, could they have kept it there and maybe done a big voter drive and gotten people outside the stadium to, register to vote if they haven't voted? Would there be other things where they could say, this is what we don't agree with this, but we want to be able to support the local economy? I mean, it's a tough decision, and there's no easy or right answer. But I do think seeing them make that decision so quickly does show that they're on the side of like what the future is going to be, and they feel for their bottom line that this was the right decision to do. And I think it was impressive that they did it so quickly as well.
By the way,
Yeah, go ahead.
last year's All-Star game was supposed to be in Los Angeles, and I
Yes.
volunteered to work it,
Right.
and of course, didn't happen. So, as
Right.
somebody who was sidelined due to a canceled All-Star game, I have to say I am concerned about the workers.
You were one of the workers. I mean,
Well, and
you would
it
have
affects
been.
them. Yeah,
Yeah.
it affects those people more than some of these big conglomerates or anything else. It's going to affect those everyday workers. And so that's where I go back and forth on that, and more of like, could they have done a huge voter drive or something to kind of counteract this and say, this is, we don't agree with this, but we want to support. But, it goes back and forth. But I do give them credit for making that decision so swiftly and, kind of looking at the future.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, the interesting thing is, something that there are people on the right who have pointed this out, that the Braves Stadium is not in Atlanta anymore. When they played at Turner Field, it was in downtown Atlanta. This is way out in the suburbs, part of a whole like corrupt local politician deal. But it's way out in Cobb County, which I believe did vote for Joe Biden. So ironically, they're actually punishing the people who did vote the way that they wanted. But it is a statewide law, and I think it is a little bit more symbolic. It's not so much about like Braves players, the Braves organization. It's like, well, this is something that this state did. And I think that, we're going to see more calls for, one of the shows I do on YouTube, I talk about Marvel movies and TV, and they do a lot of production in Atlanta, at least pre-pandemic they did. And, there've already been occasions where there've been questions about like, oh, should they be filming there? And there's a lot of just TV production in general that's done in the Atlanta area. So now you're going to wonder,
Tyler Perry, hello?
Yeah, Tyler. I mean, exactly. Tyler Perry built a whole thing, but that's I don't think anybody's.
Have we considered at all what this new voting laws, how it's going to affect the Medea franchise? Please.
Well, I actually want to know what Medea thinks. I'm hoping that we can get something on the record from Medea, and maybe even get some kind of crossover with Martin Lawrence's friend Big Mama, and maybe we could do a split screen and we could know what they both think about it. But that's neither here nor there. So I do think that it is a lot more to it than just we're going to move the All-Star game. And the first thought that I had about where to move it to was actually Los Angeles, because it was supposed to be here last summer, before there was a pandemic. That was the plan. But then I realized that they were probably really limited on where they could move it to, because they wanted to have somewhere that they knew would have full capacity by July when the game is. So you were probably only limited to Florida and Texas and maybe Missouri, but both the Royals and Cardinals have had the All-Star game within the last 10, 15 years. So you were kind of limited. So, I mean, I think that was a bit of a reason. And then there were a lot of people on the right, and there was even I always want to call him Steve Ducey, but Peter Ducey was kind enough to point out to White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki that Colorado has just as strict voting regulations as Atlanta does, because that was the talking point that was coming out. And there is even a graphic of her answering this question on Fox News after she was asked by him. And in reality, Colorado has some of the easiest voting laws in place, which the press secretary was kind enough to point out. Most people in Colorado vote by mail, which if you've been to Colorado, you feel like everything's so far apart. It's like, just mail it. I don't want to go. I don't want to go anywhere. So, so it's there was that talking point for a minute, but it is, as so many talking points can be, it was incorrect. And that is actually a fairly wide open, there's people I think you can register to vote the same day as election day, which a lot of states don't have that, So it instead of making their point, it just sort of reinforced that it was a good choice. Now, ultimately, I don't know what the harm is going to be. Tamra, you were talking sort of about the bottom line. I don't know if you're a Braves fan, if you're going to be like, well, I'm so mad now, I'm not going to watch the Braves, because they're not the ones who did it, So I don't quite know what that backlash is. I do wonder, and this is, something for Skip Bayless to talk about more than me, but I mean, our Braves players just going to say that, well, now we can't go to this All-Star game because you took it away from us. And if that's what happens, there's going to be plenty of guys who are like, great, I'll be happy to go. So,
well, I'm not familiar enough with the Braves lineup to know who from the Braves would have.
Freddie Freeman would definitely be the starting first baseman for the National League if, especially if it were held in Atlanta.
I feel like, also, if you were going to watch the All-Star game, you're still going to watch the All-Star game. If you weren't going to watch the All-Star game, you're still not going to watch the All-Star. I really don't think this has much bearing on it. And to sort of segue that into talking about the 538 has pointed out that even though the new voting laws are terrible and incredibly restrictive, they probably will not affect things that much, because people who are early voters anyway are already usually very active, politically and civically active people who are still probably, they're going to vote anyway. So it will likely have a very marginal effect. Not to say that won't be important, because the scales are, since the races are so close anyway, it might be, just the marginal amount that would tip an election in the other direction.
Yeah, that's true. But, yeah, I know, and I think it'll be interesting to see, because by the time that there's another presidential election, I think a lot of people are expecting Georgia to have a different governor and not have Brian Kemp as governor. It could be a different Republican. Who knows? We would have to see that. But and I think that, I guess it comes into, what you were saying, Scott. It's like you want to be able to say, I don't like what the state is doing, but do you want to punish some of the corporations, who are, and by the way, when I meant to say this, when the Braves issued their official statement about how disappointed they were in having the All-Star game taken away from them, they used the team logo, which has a tomahawk on it, which is just sort of reminding you that, like, oh yeah, our racist logo and our racist pastime are not at issue here, but and we're trying to talk about important issues like voting rights. So I don't know, it's funny. We'll see what happens. I mean, the Cleveland Indians aren't going to be called the Cleveland Indians anymore. I don't know if that's as soon as next year. So I think change comes a little slower to places like Georgia, but it's interesting.
What do you want Cleveland's new name to be, Christian?
Well, I would hope it would be the Cleveland Steamers, but if not, what I think of when I think of Cleveland, thank you, Scott, I'm glad you like that, would be the Cleveland. But I would also settle for the Cleveland Rocks, like the song that was.
I was just going to say that.
Ian Hunter song that they used for the Drew Carey show. I would be okay with that. If they wanted to be called the Cleveland Rocks, that'd be pretty sweet. I mean, they got the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, They got the Rock Museum. Exactly.
Too close to the Rockies.
Got to be the Cleveland Rocks.
It is too close to the Rockies. You're absolutely right. All right.
I don't know if you did Cleveland Rocks or you did something with rock and roll theme, because you
Rocks
have to.
versus the Rockies.
Yeah, come on. Something like that.
Or they somehow take the nickname Jazz away from Utah, a state that doesn't deserve to be called the Utah Jazz. Anyway,
right. Well, I mean, they were New Orleans Jazz. They just never.
No, I know. Oh, it made sense at that point.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. In any case, I just wanted to kind of start there because obviously there's more to that than there is, than it is about baseball. That's obviously sort of in the micro. But when you look at it, I think we're going to see a lot more. I mean, President Trump's fake protest and boycott of Coke notwithstanding, which I think I think he's completely incapable of that. Like if he were ever to start having like Diet Pepsi bottles on his desk, they would get 100%. They'd be filled with Diet Coke, but he would just be doing it for show. Which imagine if that's your job, by the way, is to replace all the Diet Pepsi with Diet Coke in it. But anyway, we're talking a little bit before we got started, and California is very soon going to open up vaccinations to everybody. And President Biden had previously said May 1st, and now he's like, no, April 19th. Come on, let's get this done. And it's interesting because it tells me that at least the vaccination rollout is going well, even though I think it's maybe 30 some odd % of the American public, or not the American public, of eligible people, I think, have either a single dose Johnson & Johnson or 2 doses of one of the other ones. Ain't nobody with no AstraZeneca. Like, let's not be crazy here. All right. But, so, cause they went from like, we're going to do 100 million in the first 100 days. Psych. We're doing 200 million in the first 100 days. And so they're moving everything up. And I think it sounds encouraging. I always try to be positive on the show when we talk about these things. And here locally, you hear Gavin Newsom saying like, yeah, June 15th, it's probably going to be like business as usual. And then I was like, oh, wait, that sounds really fast. Guy who's more worried about being recalled than anything else. What do you think about these timelines, Scott? In terms of, making it sooner that everyone can qualify for shots, and also, states like California saying that, we might be 2 months away from the roaring 20s.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, completely getting rid of the whole tier system as well. Like they're just, it is interesting. I believe on one hand it's a little over 2 months away. That would give 2 months basically of having everyone that wants to get the vaccine the opportunity to have it. And that's also assuming, which he did say, the caveat being, will they have enough vaccines? Will that rollout continue? As far as the Biden administration with their rollout, you could take it 2 different ways. It's the old tactic of, doing the under of and then over delivering. So in some hand, it's on one hand, it's like you would prefer that maybe they were a little bit more transparent to say from the get-go, hey, we're going to be able to ramp up to 3 or 4 million shots a day, and at this pace we'll be able to make these deadlines. But on the other hand, when you basically under promise and over deliver, it of course is the PR 101. I mean, it just makes you look really great, and it makes, compared to the predecessor, it looks like you've set a low bar for yourself and you've exceeded it every time. So it does make the Biden administration look a lot better when they're saying, hey, well, we'll do this by the summer, and then, it's May 1st, and now it's April 19th. And, it does make it look like there's more competency and everything. And not to say there hasn't been. They have done an excellent job rolling this out, and it would be fascinating. We'll never be able to know how it would have been if Trump was in office and how this would be, where we'd be at right now. But there's 2 sides to that. So I think it works for them.
Babies would be vaccinated by now.
I know that's,
actually the vaccine fairy would have visited us all in our sleeps, and we would have woken up.
So we all would have been fine.
Already having been inoculated, and
coronavirus would have been stuffed into a bottle and shot into space by now.
Or at least shot at North Korea. But I see. I see your point.
But I think it's in this case it's worked, and it's going to look good for the Biden administration that they've continued to set these benchmarks and surpass them earlier, and it gets us closer to being back to normal. I also think with the California rule, beyond the recall, we're just at a point now where it's been, it'll be 15 months at that point since everything first shut down, the back and forth. the whiplash of going back and forth of opening and closing. So I think they want to get to a point where they feel like, okay, after 60 days of having it open to every eligible adult, they feel like they're going to be a better place. I mean, we're in the orange tier right now in LA County. There's only one more tier to go, the yellow tier, before you're essentially.
Which, by the way, these tier colors make absolutely no sense. The only
exactly.
color coding that makes sense is red, yellow, and green. I mean,
Right.
it's
Well,
almost like any of us who've ever worked in television and script revision pages are like, well, then it's salmon and then double buff and off white and
oh god, I remember those days,
right?
Yes,
yeah.
I worked as a script PA, so that just brings me back to like middle of the night copying printers.
No, but this is supposed to be salmon, you idiot, not pink.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
But that said, I mean, remember the terror colors that they had under the Bush administration? Those went away because it was just didn't really have the same meaning anymore. But yeah, I mean, that said, I think, we only have one more step to go in the next couple of weeks to the yellow tier for some of these big populated counties like LA County. So you are on that trajectory now to essentially go beyond that yellow tier, which means you could open up fully. So I don't think it's a crazy timeline. And obviously they're going to have the right to be able to scale back and say, look, we're not where we wanted to be, either with herd, immunity, or we didn't get the vaccines at the levels we want, so we'll have to push it back. But I don't think they will. I think they feel pretty optimistic that the rate that we're going, that who knows, they might be able to push it up another 2 weeks too, because I think they're going to take a page from the Biden administration and say, let's put it further out. And then we come back and say, oh, we can open up by June 1st now. We can open up by Memorial Day. That's going to let it, again, look successful. So I think they're going to kind of play that same playbook that the Biden team is doing right now. And so I don't foresee it being anything longer. And I think, yeah, and again, if you have to wear masks and everything else, then at least you're keeping that sort of safety thing in mind. So I'm supportive of it. I think we're at a place now where we're ready to get back out there into the world, and people that aren't, again, don't have to. So it's a good balance.
Yeah, I actually a couple of weeks ago, I met up with a friend at what was supposed to be let's get together on the outdoor patio at a bar in Norco. So if you know California at all, that's out by Riverside. Mm-hmm. And there were a lot of people on the patio, but you know what there were more of? Way more people inside. There was a band playing, there were people dancing, and they definitely weren't serving any food. And you're like, oh, okay, so this is what it's going to be like.
Yeah, and I was just back in Florida again last week.
Yeah, sure. Well, that's what church is like there.
Yes, and as I was going to say, is like it kind of threw me off a bit, because I went into the gym there, and it was inside, of course, and they're like, oh, you don't have to wear your mask because you're doing cardio and stuff. And I was like, oh, this is so weird. And then I went to Topgolf just because it's down the street from where I was staying. I was like, oh, I'll just hit a few rounds there. And yes, you're like in individual bays, but people were next to you and like, oh, you don't have to wear your mask when you're, in your area. So it was like, it's such a weird, it's just such a different mentality than it is even still here, because even after June 15th, we're still gonna have to wear masks. Where there, it's like, oh yeah, you don't have to, just, when you're coming and going. But when you're working out or you're doing whatever, you can take the mask off. So it's definitely a different mentality for sure. Still, even out here after June 15th compared to places like Florida and Texas.
And clearly you're fishing for compliments, Scott. We could tell you've been going to the gym lately. It's been paying off. You look great. All right. So obviously we know that's what you were looking for. So
thank you.
Those shoulders.
I appreciate it. I know those shoulders are like, yes.
Tamra, Dr. Fauci says that by this weekend, half of U.S. adults will have at least one of their shots. And he also officially said, like, yeah, let's not use that AstraZeneca. He's like, everything's going well. Like, let's go ahead and not do that. What do you think about the same timelines that we've been talking about? Sort of the idea that we can open it up to more people now. Because look, we were talking before the show that there are a lot of places here in California that are already just come and get them, because we have so many, we don't want them to go to waste. And that tells me, the idea that everybody can start signing up sooner than we thought is probably because of that, just because there's so many out there, right? So what do you think about that timeline and sort of the local, let's reopen the whole state on June 15th?
I feel good about the timeline. I'm happy that I live in a state that is handing out vaccines like Oprah. You get a vaccine and you get a vaccine. Everybody look under your seats.
It's Moderna.
And then today they did say that they, because in Europe where they were reporting some blood clots from the AstraZeneca, they reported today that, maybe that is the case, because originally they were saying there's no evidence that these blood clots are a result of AstraZeneca, but now they're saying they might actually be. So
yeah, I think that original finding was from doctors Astra and Zeneca. So I don't know. That might have been some misleading information.
So, but I'm happy that the most vulnerable seem to be largely vaccinated at this point, and the rollout is continuing to go quicker. And I'm happy with the timelines. I think California opening up in June seems about right. It's not quite mid-April yet, so that's still 2 whole months away. And like Scott said, these can always be adjusted. Should some other variant, God forbid, get out of hand or something happen, these timelines can always be adjusted. But everything sounds good to me. As goes Fauci, so goes California.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that we should have gotten the All-Star game this year, and then you would have been able to volunteer at it. So really, Denver screwed you out of.
Angels are already accepting audience. Angels already are already allowing crowds in. The Dodgers are going to. I'm very excited about the Padres this year. They are going to be a very promising team. So it's going to be a good year for baseball in Southern California, whether we have the All-Star game or not.
Just working under the assumption that just say by this June 15th date. Well, let's just say that we're all vaccinated by then. What are you personally comfortable doing? I have like eaten outside once or twice, but one of them I was up in Santa Barbara, and I'm like, do I really want to eat this meal in my car? It just seemed like, usually I bring it home. I have 2 small kids, as anybody knows. It's not that fun to go to a restaurant with them anyway. On a patio isn't really that going to be that much better. I think I miss going to the movies more than anything, but just what are you personally comfortable with, Tamra? Like, you think, like, assuming you've gotten your vaccine and that things are going well in the state, would you go to a baseball game at some point? Because I know that's under normal circumstances, it's something you'd consider.
Yeah, I mean, I am a person that I'm like these college kids who I feel invincible, so because I don't feel personally at risk, I am probably a little less responsible than I should be, having flown during the pandemic and things like that. But that being said, I also am extremely, I feel that, as long as you are washing your hands, disinfecting, and wearing the mask at all times, so that you're letting those around you know that you're, conscientious and trying to be as careful of your fellow citizens. I'm comfortable with, I'd go to a game tomorrow. I'm really excited for concerts to open up. I really miss going to live concerts. Those are likely to, I'm sure those are going to start outdoors, within a couple months. And I'm really excited for life to get back to normal. And I still run with a mask because you never know what the person passing you, how they feel. So I want to make other people feel comfortable. Sure. So even though I personally don't feel like I'm at risk, I want to make sure that I'm taking precautions to help anybody else that may be, around me. So I think that that's important. But personally, I do feel comfortable, but yet guilty. I feel comfortable going out and doing these things, but I also feel like, sorry, I'm going to a baseball game. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think there's I've got let's see, what is it? It's April 28th is like one of the only weekday day games all year the Dodgers have against the Reds. And I'm like, I think I might. Oh, look at that! I can celebrate for you. And so I'm like, yeah, I think I might do that. But in terms of what you were saying about live music, I drove like almost 2 hours down to Lake Elsinore, which is it's like a little north of Temecula. My friend plays in
To
a
see
Kiss
the
tribute
storm?
band. Yeah, it was actually at the Storm Stadium. My friend plays in a Kiss tribute band, which I'll admit that I am a Kiss fan since I was a kid anyway. But I'm like, oh, you're going to be playing. It was a drive-in outdoor concert, and I'm like, yeah, I would like to see some live music for the first time in what was 53 weeks at the time. So yes, I will definitely do that. And yeah, the idea of like, and look, I mean, the weather's usually nice here, but it's going to be a great time to have some outdoor concerts. I would love if they could do some kind of capacity at like the Hollywood Bowl or the Greek Theater. Probably you can't have the big touring acts that you usually do because they can't, afford to only play half capacity. But I would love to be able to go to any of that stuff at some time this summer if that's where we're heading. What about you, Scott? You've been in these other states. So everybody's basically going to, like my mom lives in Florida and she's like, oh yeah, well, we've been going to restaurants for a while. We feel safe. The tables are far apart, all that. What's your comfort level at this point? And does it change come June 15th when we're working with the assumption that the majority of people are going to have these vaccines?
Yeah, I mean, like Tamra says, and I'm on the exact same page as her. I feel the same way. I not so much like, oh, I'm invincible that I can't get it. I either feel like I either had it at some point last year when I came back from a international trip, right when everything was shutting down in February, because I remember not feeling well before you could get tested. But I've been fortunate because I have been out in the world since last June because my shows, were going on when we started ramping up again. And I've been traveling and I've been tested regularly, at least weekly, sometimes twice a week through most of that time period. And been able to get by. And I, to Tamara's point, I agree. If it's just common sense, like I have the hand sanitizer with me, I wear my mask and, try to take common sense approaches. And I think even then, before I even had the first vaccine shot, I didn't feel that uncomfortable because I was already out there in the world for a while. And so I will definitely be ready to partake in everything. And even now I've been back going to the gym. It's been outside, but
yes, we know the shoulders. Yeah,
exactly. And I do some jogging too. And same thing with Tamara. Like I will take my mask off if I'm not around people, or if someone comes by, I will put it on just out of respect. But I'm ready. And I definitely miss obviously concerts. I miss live music. And I definitely miss theater and live shows. So those are things that I'll definitely look forward to going back to. I did go to the movies like a week or so ago when they first opened up here, because there's a new movie theater by my house that's been delayed multiple times in its opening. And I really actually felt comfortable there too, because of the fact that it was only at this point, I think it was like 10% capacity at that period, because we were still in the red tier, wherever we were in LA County at the point. But I felt comfortable because nobody was immediately around me. And the way they were doing it is sort of a zigzag approach to where you didn't have anybody right next to you. You didn't have anybody in front of you. They were over, and they had it spaced out that way. So I didn't even feel uncomfortable in the theater as well. So it felt very good. In fact, I was like, God, I wish movies could always be like this, where I don't have people right in front of me and next to me.
I like the thing that all the big chains are doing right now too, where you can like rent out a theater for like
I'm doing that as well. Yep, I'm doing that as well for my birthday.
What are you going to rent out?
Back to the Future, of course, because that's one of my favorites. So,
well, yeah, I think I mean, that is the one thing. It's like, it's sort of limited, and like Disney's holding on to all their movies. So that means, no Disney, no Star Wars, no Marvel, no none of that stuff. Right. But I mean, yeah, but you can also do it for like one of the newer movies that are out now. Usually that costs a little bit more.
It costs a lot. It costs a lot more depending on the chain. It costs a lot more.
I'm shocked that Tamra hasn't rented out a whole theater to see Godzilla versus Kong by herself and just been like, stuck at 19 friends. I'm not sharing with anybody.
Well, that's how I felt too. I was like, I'll just go see it by myself. I don't even need
I know it's like $100 is a bit much, but I'm like, oh man.
I thought you were gonna say Field of Dreams.
No. Godzilla versus Kong was funnier.
Is that an expensive?
Well, it's a new movie.
It's a new movie, so it's going to be more
money.
It's like
I am so removed from any superhero action that world at all. I don't even know if that's a new movie or an old movie. I apologize.
Or by the way, it also sounds like a movie I made up. Let's be 100% honest. Like Godzilla versus King Kong, that sounds like, well, nobody would actually make that. Except Warner Brothers did, and they're actually giving it away for free on HBO Max. But anyway.
Right.
Yeah, I think that I've been to the drive-in a bunch of times. I miss going to the movies, and I think I have to chip away at my wife a little bit more about the idea of that. But with because it's sort of like Disneyland. It's like I still want to go when the capacity is less. Like I would love to go to Disneyland when I don't even know, it's going to open at like 25%. I'm like, well, that sounds
and only
great.
Californians, right?
Yeah, right.
You have to be a resident.
I don't want any of those trash Arizona or Nevadans. I don't want any of them slumming it. Yeah. Although they don't really make you prove it. I think that the person who buys the tickets, the credit card needs to go to a California address. But
interesting. I could start a little business here.
Yep, you sure could. You could do a whole tourism agency. Anyway, we hope that the news continues to be good about the reopenings. You do see things in other parts of the country that are of concern. And then you really see some of the differences in other parts of the world, like Brazil in particular. I think if you want to have any indication, even a slight indication of what it would be like if Donald Trump were still president, he and Bolsonaro, they're not really the same. But, there may be like eggs from the similar dozen, the same dozen, I mean. And, you hear about some real problems there. And I think in the UK, they're still like lockdown. And I know France just went back under it. So I think we're starting to see sort of we're getting back to the mentality of, I think, why everybody hates us as Americans, because we're like, oh yeah, like Tamra said, Oprah's giving vaccines to everybody. And then they only have this really crappy one that gives you blood clots. And they're like, I don't even know if I want to take it, so it'll be interesting to see what happens in the rest of the world. You hear about these variants. The UK variant is apparently the #1 variant here in the US now, so I'm like, well, then I guess it's not really the UK variant, is it? But it's it's the clear green vinyl if you want to look at a variant in that way. But I don't so I think that you can hope that things are going well. And look, it is getting warmer all over the country, so hopefully people are outside more, and that'll only contribute to just overall health. And
I think the difference is, and again, that's what we're seeing, is like we can see that they have not been as quick on getting the vaccines out in the EU as we have started to accelerate. And Britain has to some degree too, but we've started to accelerate enough. And even though there is a concern about these variants and maybe like a fourth wave, the difference is, will it affect people the same way? Because most of the most vulnerable of our population and nursing homes and other people have already gotten their vaccines. And you've seen that the numbers of deaths in like nursing homes has gone down something like astronomically, like 91% since January alone, when we were right in that peak of that third wave. So even if there is a fourth wave, depending on how we're getting ahead and getting enough people vaccinated, it may not have the same detrimental effects and the deaths and the extreme illnesses that we've seen before. So that's the other positive thing, that the variants could come into play here. And at some point, and we've talked about this at length, I do believe that this will end up being sort of like a flu shot type thing, that people will have to go for boosters. There will be other variants that will circle around again when the weather cools off and things, and there's a possibility that maybe the vaccine doesn't last more than 6 months. So I think it will be something that will be continually have to be possibly booster shots and stuff in the future. But you're seeing the differences right now. So that's where I feel even more comfortable that if people are getting vaccinated, the numbers of extreme hospitalizations and deaths will continue to decline as well. So that's the other good thing.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think it's worth seeing how it all goes, and hopefully it continues to go well around the world. Somebody that I didn't expect to be talking about at any point soon, or maybe even ever again, is former House Speaker John Boehner, who has a new book, and I'm gonna have 100% on the terrible title, "On the House," a Washington number. That is it.
I don't get it.
Well, because he was Speaker of the
House.
Okay. Of the House.
Wordplay.
Yeah, but in his book, he said he blames former President Trump for saying he incited a bloody insurrection with the bullshit he was shoveling. And former President Trump was very quick to respond, not so much to the content of the allegation, asking, was he drinking when he made this statement? Just another rhino who couldn't do the job. And I think that I don't know. Maybe I have an affinity for John Boehner in some ways because he had that really deep voice where you think that he should have really been doing audiobooks the whole time. And I don't know. I mean, he did have like kind of a great blue collar upbringing. He like swept up the hair in his dad's barbershop. There were things about him that I liked as a figure, but maybe it's just because somebody like Mitch McConnell's so terrible. Am I putting lipstick on a pig by thinking back on John Boehner? Was he from the same mold as some of these guys, Scott? Or because I mean, what he's saying here, I think is a strong statement, and that's why I wanted to talk about it. But am I seeing him through through what former President Trump would consider through drunk girl glasses, and that's why I'm thinking that maybe he wasn't so bad.
Well, I think it goes back to everything with human nature, right? Like we go through a terrible job or we have a bad relationship, and then some time passes by and we're like, oh, human nature just in survival mode. That's just, we only look at the good things after a while too. We're like, oh, that job wasn't so bad. And I miss going to meet that person there at the office every day, or I miss this thing that this person did in our relationship, and you forget about all the horrible things that happened. And that kind of happened, when we had Trump as president and people were looking back at George W. Bush's administration, be like, oh, he wasn't that bad. He wasn't that bad of a guy. But there's two things with John Boehner. Like, yes, I do believe that it had been, it's been a decade since he was in that leadership position, and things are a bit different. He comes back from the good old boy country club Republican mentality. He wasn't as extreme. And so I think there is a looking back and be like, oh, it's not so bad. But also, he's not currently in office or planning on running for office. So now, like a lot of Republicans that don't have spines suddenly grow a spine when they leave office. So it would be a different tune, I believe, if he was in office right now or planning another run, to where he might not be as outspoken as he is. But he's definitely less extreme than the mold that we have now. So I believe that's why a lot of people are looking back like it's not so bad. But he definitely wasn't great during the 2010, 2011 time period when the Republicans had control in the House and at that time period before they actually had the Senate. He definitely wasn't helpful. And the sequestrations, or I can't even think of how to say the word right now, but when they were doing all the.
Yeah, and then there was also, it seemed like every month the House would pass a resolution trying to overturn Obamacare.
Exactly.
Since, from the day it passed, it was like, oh, and here's another one. And it's like they were just passing it so that it could be, shot down by the then Democratic Senate. Yeah.
Exactly. Like they did it all for optics because they knew it would never pass, but, or the president at the time, because obviously he was going to veto it. But compared to where we are now with Republicans, it does have that like, oh, so much nicer, kind of like George W. Bush. You're like, oh, those were like when Republicans are a little bit more normal. I mean, they've been extreme for the past decade, but it was before we've gotten to where we are now. And now he's all pro marijuana and, but he is just that, country club Republican kind of guy. And he's not coming from that Trump wing of the party as well. So, and he never had been. So that's another difference too, for most people that can't stand Trump or that wing of the party, that he definitely seems, warm and fuzzy now in comparison.
Yeah. And Tamra, less so much about John Boehner, but this idea that he's from it's sort of like an earlier school of Republican, because in his book, he describes Ted Cruz as a reckless asshole. And he talks about fighting with the Tea Party Republicans and fighting with Fox News. And he also talks about how he was attacked by members of his own party for saying that Barack Obama, get this, was born in America. So obviously, even at that time, he was dealing with a lot of the backlash that we're having. And, he's saying all these things that you're like, well, yeah, I think a lot of people feel this way. But it seems like honestly, it seems like from an earlier era, that now you basically don't you don't criticize. They're not criticized. Ronald Reagan always said, "Don't shoot within the tent." And at this time, the tent was already shooting so much that you just had to kind of lay low and try to survive. But what do you think about some of these characterizations of friends of this show, like Ted Cruz and former President Trump?
I just, too little too late with John Boehner. I mean, this book should have this news should have come out 4 months ago. I don't give credit to the Republicans who are claiming that Trump's claims of election fraud, are false, saying that now, like.
Yeah, that's fair.
He is the skinniest kid at fat camp, but the most progressive Republican. I make an analogous to the skinniest kid at fat camp, but he's what's the point? I don't see how he's benefiting his party at this point. So
yeah, as my sometime boss Dennis Miller would say, the valedictorian at summer school. It's a little bit of faint praise. The last thing I wanted to talk about is Kamala Harris has been put in charge of the border, and it's been pointed out in the 14 days since she was placed in charge of the border, she has not gone to the border, but she's visited a bakery, a water plant, and her home in Los Angeles. There's a picture of her in Oakland, and so I'm wondering about and look, I don't think you have to actually be down at the border for photo ops if you're actually doing the work. But I think that we deal so much in optics these days. I'll ask you first, Tamra. Do you feel like if she's in charge of this, should we be seeing things that make us feel like she's in charge of this? And hopefully she is doing stuff and we're just not seeing it. Like right now, I mean.
Yes. But because the border is such a complicated issue, what images should we be seeing that would be satisfactory? Because really any type of photo that could be publicized would be equally criticized. Either, if she's handing out water to children, they'd say like, "Oh, thanks." That would be like Trump throwing the paper towels in Puerto Rico, or
those children better not be in line to vote in Georgia, because then she'd actually get in a lot of trouble for giving them water.
Yeah, or So what would be sufficient?
Well, I think if our friend Storage Yard Resident were in the chat today, he would say maybe she should put on a hard hat, get a shovel, and start finishing that wall that President Trump was unable to finish before he left office. What do you think? What do you think, Scott, about what she could be doing, what she probably is doing, but again, that we do live in an age of how important the optics are and the perception of what someone is actually doing.
I mean, yeah, you're exactly right. It's the same kind of thing when they were talking about how President Biden didn't do a press conference, and we're like, okay, he's working. It's silly, and then he was fine in the press conference. Like they kept saying, oh, why is he not doing that? And I get it is all about optics. Like there was the one with the picture with Ted Cruz the other week where he's sitting there with his, at the border, like looking like he's doing something. I mean, granted, sure, could she go down there, especially when she went to LA or Oakland, when it's an easy flight down to the border? Sure. But as she had said, she's planning on visiting these countries that are most impacted, like actually going to Mexico and meeting with the government officials, and going to El Salvador and Guatemala and Honduras, and the countries that have been affected. And as we've talked about, not only from our policies going back 30 plus years, but also from, especially in Central America, those recent devastating hurricanes from last fall that have displaced a lot of people that no one is still really talking about, that a lot of those folks have been uprooted from their houses because they've been completely destroyed and there's no work to be had there. So, when she actually goes to visit those, and I know those type of meetings don't just happen overnight. It takes a while for that kind of planning to happen. That will make more of an impact than anything else when you're actually going to meet with the government officials. You're trying to see what kind of things that you can do and collaborate. because you have to stop it there and help fix the problems there. Because like we've talked about, no one just wants to leave if they don't have to. Sure, she could go for the photo ops and everything, and sure, it's like she could be saying she's working 60 hours a week on this and all that, but without seeing that, that, like you said, Christian, that photo op of like, oh, she's here doing the PR stunt, but at the end of the day, it really doesn't do anything but just be a PR stunt. So the bigger thing will be the action, and will she be able to meet with these government officials in these other countries? Will they be able to come up with some kind of plan? But it should be good. Like President Biden, she should go in the next few weeks, at least to a detention center where the children are, at least something to where, a lot of first ladies have done that. A lot of other, government officials have done that besides just even a president.
And she should not wear a jacket that says, right. I don't really care, do you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that might not help. Yeah, that doesn't help the optics. Well, it's obviously, as always, it's something that we'll keep an eye on. Something that I feel like we'll touch on next week because it hasn't happened yet. But tomorrow, President Biden is expected to unveil some long-awaited executive action on guns, which has sort of been the tragic part of people putting the pandemic behind them. Is there has been, there's been so much gun violence in the last few months, and it was something that, we at least we had that minimized during the pandemic. So we'll talk about that. And I guess the only final thing to talk about is that our expectation going forward is that this is the day and time where we'll be doing this show, Wednesdays at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, until we change it. But consistently, this is when we're going to try to do the show. And I know it's moved around a lot, but we appreciate everybody who hung with us. But the best thing is you can always just subscribe to the Blackcast YouTube channel. You won't only get this show, but, some of that other stuff isn't so bad because I'm on it, so I'm a little partial, I suppose. But so please join us Wednesdays at 11 Pacific for this show. We always appreciate everybody there in the chat. I saw that you guys and women were there today, but you were quiet today. And that's all right. Mm-hmm. We think that what we were saying was so interesting that nobody wanted to chime in. So I appreciate that. You can subscribe to the Blackcast YouTube channel, and you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at ChristianDMZ. You can follow the show at Biden Time TV. And Tamra, I want to make sure that I know, how are you handling the hacking of OnlyFans? Has all of your revenue from your OnlyFans dried up because they're getting everything for free now?
I wish that affected me. I should have jumped on that OnlyFans thing, early pandemic. Missed the boat on that one.
Well, it's you could have been the next Bella Thorne. In any case, people can find you on TikTok, though, right?
Hey, Tamra, right there.
Right there. And Scott and I not on TikTok, but if you do want to find Scott, where can they find you, Scott?
They can find me, at SMan80 right down here.
I know it's you got to get used to where to point. It's like
I know it's like when I used to do green screen and I would do weather things in college. I was like, never get it right, but yes, at SMan80.
Exactly. Well, thank you both, and thanks to everybody who watched. And if you're watching the archive version, please leave your comments down below, and we will see you next Wednesday.